Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one I'll be highlighting 5 players that I've been looking to sell high on ahead of Week 10. Obviously, don't take this as me telling you guys that you need to go out there and just get whatever you can for these players. These are still good players, players that I think can help you guys the rest of the way, but they're guys that I just think are a little bit overvalued, maybe aren't going to help you when you need them to the rest of the way. So they're guys that I would at least consider kicking the can on trading away if the situation makes sense for your roster. Of course, trading ends up being super roster and situation dependent, so if you guys do have any specific trade questions, let me know in the comments below. I love helping you guys out there. The more context you give me, the better an answer I can give you guys. Hopefully we can do what we can to get you guys as optimized and ready to roll for Week 10 as possible and do what we can to get you guys into the playoffs and win some championships here. So should be a lot of fun. These are 5 players that I'm at least actively trying to consider moving off of, and if you guys have any disagreements or anything, just let me know in the comments as well. It's super fun interacting there. Let's get into it. Starting things off with the only quarterback I could consider, it's going to be Joe Burrow. And I know that it sounds crazy to mention Joe Burrow as a sell high. He's been absolutely phenomenal. He's thrown for 5 passing touchdowns twice already this season. He's been great, and he's got another great matchup here in Week 10. I bet Joe Burrow's going to go out there and have a great game against Baltimore, one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, one of the best matchups for opposing passing games. So if you want to wait a week on that, I think it's totally okay. But the real reason I'm highlighting him here is just because the playoff schedule is not great. He plays the Titans, the Browns, and the Broncos. 3 good defenses and kind of bad offenses. So just a situation where I don't think you're really going to need Joe Burrow to go out there and throw for 4 or 5 touchdowns in those games. You're kind of really hoping that, the Bengals probably score 2 to 3 touchdowns in each of those games. You really need Burrow to get all of them for him to be really good for fantasy. So he is a great player, obviously. His weapons are awesome. I do think he's a top 10 quarterback the rest of the way. But I think when we get to the fantasy playoffs, you're going to be asking yourself, like, should I start Joe Burrow or Jared Goff or Joe Burrow or Kirk Cousins or Joe Burrow or Baker Mayfield? Like, those kinds of players I think are going to be right in the conversation with Joe Burrow because of these really tough matchups. And if you're going to value Joe Burrow as someone who's like a superstar, he's coming off a week where he was the quarterback 1, I think you can get a lot for him, and I don't think it'll be a significant step down for you, especially in the fantasy playoffs if you're just streaming the position with one of those good options. So I think it makes a lot of sense to at least consider moving off of him as somebody that I think is sort of peaked in his value and just won't really help you win your championship, and that's sort of what this is all about. We don't care if we go 9-5 and lose first round of the playoffs. That doesn't do us any good. That's no fun. We're playing to win the championship, and I just don't really think Burrow's going to be the guy to help get you there this year. Next up, we got a running back I want to highlight as a sell high, and it's going to be Kareem Hunt. And the main reason here is that just Pacheco's reportedly going to be back in a few weeks here. Kareem Hunt, he's playing really well, but he's not an asset that's really going to help you win in the fantasy playoffs. Let's say Isaiah Pacheco comes back. They say he's going to miss about 3 more weeks, so he'll probably come back at the end of November. That puts him as a guy who's back for week 13, week 14. That means Pacheco's not really a guy that's going to help you in fantasy personally unless you make the playoffs with him, but it means that when he comes back, those 2 crucial weeks to get you into the playoffs, both he and Kareem Hunt are probably going to acclimate Pacheco back in. You're looking at probably like a 50-50 split there, and then after that, you're looking at Kareem Hunt probably being the backup for the fantasy playoffs, at a minimum being in a timeshare there. Makes things really gross, so you're probably doing really well. If you're a Kareem Hunt manager, you're probably sitting at 6-3, 7-2. He's been a huge asset for you, unless maybe you were just added him because you had Isaiah Pacheco and lost him. But Kareem Hunt's going to be useful for you guys the next few weeks, and he's probably been good enough to get you to a good spot right now. And I think it's a good opportunity to trade him to somebody that needs to win out. Look at somebody who's down bad at running back. They're 3-6, 4-5. They need to start winning some games, and Kareem Hunt can certainly help them do that. But if you're 7-2, 6-3, don't necessarily need to optimize for the next couple weeks. I would try and package him with somebody and get some other player that's going to help you be more dominant when we get to the fantasy playoffs, because again, that really is what we're looking to do right now, is just dominate those 3 weeks, because that's how we end up winning championships. Second running back to highlight here, and this is not an attempt to rag on the Bengals at all, but Chase Brown is a guy that I would at least consider selling high on. Coming off of a really fantastic game, he looked great, scored a touchdown through the air, has looked honestly really good this season. I think he's a talented player, really explosive, but I just don't think this last week's going to be really very indicative of how the rest of the season is going to go. The Bengals found out on Friday, because that's when Zach Moss got hurt, that they weren't going to have Zach Moss, and they were sort of just forced out of necessity to make Chase Brown an entire featured back, and he played really well to warrant, he earned a lot of touches. He's obviously going to trend up the rest of the way here, but they did trade for Khalil Herbert today. Not that Khalil Herbert's ever done a lot in his fantasy career or in his NFL career in general, but he's a good pet player, a good running back, a guy they will give touches to, and it's just going to mean that Chase Brown is not going to be the primary workhorse back that he was this week. Beyond that, you're looking at a guy in Chase Brown who's just not going to get to play the Raiders every week. The Raiders are one of, if not the best matchups for opposing running backs just because they suck. So you can obviously get ahead running them. Chase Brown had a lot of opportunities. Really talented player. And but I did already mention the playoff schedule in Cincinnati, really just not great. Like, again, you get the Browns, the Titans, and the Broncos. Neither one of those games gets you excited as a guy for Chase Brown, as someone like, I don't see a world where Chase Brown goes out there and scores twice in either of those games. You need to get really lucky for that to happen. So if you can get like top 12 running back value for him, I've seen him and George Pickens get traded for Jamar Chase in a league. Like things like that are happening in leagues that for teams that like need running back help. And Chase Brown is probably not like a super important part of your roster. He wasn't. You didn't draft him to be your RB2 in all likelihood. If you've got 2 or 3 running backs ahead of him, I think you could look at moving him and potentially getting a significant upgrade at the wide receiver position, or just looking to get somebody that's going to have a better playoff schedule, because I do think that Chase Brown is going. He peaked this week. Is really what I'm getting at. Should be like a fringe. He'll be a solid RB2 the rest of the way. I just don't expect a lot more out of Chase Brown. So if someone values him more than that, I would at least consider moving off of him. Next, we got one wide receiver I'd look to sell high on. That's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. Look, he's incredibly talented. We know he's a Hall of Famer. He's been fantastic throughout his entire career, and he just come off of a monster game for the Kansas City Chiefs on prime time. And all of those reasons are reasons why we should be looking to sell high on him. He's got name value. He's got value associated with just what people put on that offense. Any player on the Chiefs, people a little bit amplify. Coming off of a big game on prime time, so everybody saw him score twice. But this offense in Kansas City really has struggled to support wide receiver production outside of Rashee Rice just being force-fed slants. Hopkins is not that kind of player. They're going to throw, he'll catch the occasional contested pass. We saw that this last week. They'll use him near the red zone. That's great. It makes him, he's got a real chance to score 2 touchdowns every week. Like, he's a fantastic player. He's going to be a touchdown weapon for this team. But Travis Kelce's a guy they utilize near the red zone a ton. They get creative with different end arounds and stuff like that. Kareem Hunt's a guy they really love to lean on. Mahomes has really only had one good game in fantasy this season. This was this last week, and it was against a really bad passing defense in Tampa Bay. So everything did just sort of line up there for Hopkins to go out there and have a big game. And beyond that, older wide receivers like DeAndre Hopkins they're likely to tail off as the season rolls on. We saw that with like Stephon Diggs last year, Adam Thielen last year. Those guys, start really hot, they perform really well, and then eventually they just get to a point where their body can't continue to perform at that high of a level. And on top of that, the schedule for the Chiefs in the playoffs, they get the Browns, the Texans, and then the Steelers in the fantasy playoffs. At least the Browns and the Steelers, not matchups that I'm super stoked about. Like, those are 2 good defenses. The Steelers, especially in the fantasy championship, like, are you really going to be excited about playing Hopkins in that game? I know I won't be. So I think if you can get a solid wide receiver 2 value for Hopkins, I would look to do it. He's a guy that he's going to have some more good games. He'll score a few more touchdowns the rest of the way, but I just don't view him as like a reliable weekly starter. I view him more as like a boomer bust flex play, sort of touchdown dependent play there. And I just, the Chiefs have not been an offensive gold mine the rest of most of the season. I think that Rashee Rice is clearly a better player than DeAndre Hopkins. So, like, this offense isn't better now than it was at the start of the season. There's no reason in my eyes to believe that Hopkins is going to come out here and be a rock star the rest of the way. So I would at least look to see what you can get for him right now. And in maybe a bit of a controversial one, I'm going to say that Brock Bowers is a bit of a sell high right now. This one sucks to mention because Bowers is clearly a stud. He is a guy that I think I don't want to move off of, but if you can still get like tight end 1 overall value out of him, I think it at least makes sense to kick the can on it. There's the possibility of the Raiders switching quarterbacks over to Desmond Ridder. Not that their current quarterback play out of Gardner Minshew has been great, but Ridder's worse. We saw what that meant for the Falcons offense last year. Rooting for Ridder, obviously. Like, I'm not rooting for him to suck or any of that, but like, it's just not going to work out. We've seen it with Ridder. On top of that, they just fired their offensive coordinator. There's no direction in this offense at all. This Raiders team they don't know which way's up. They're really struggling as a franchise. On top of that, Jacoby Myers has sort of been operating as the number 1 target in the offense. And, Brock Bowers is still really talented, getting involved. He's a guy that we can use every single week. But if someone does value him as the tight end 1 still, I think it's a great time to at least try and move off of him. I prefer, at a minimum, Kelce, McBride, and Kittle the rest of the way. If you want to put Cade Otton in there, I think you could make an argument for that. Brock Bowers, again, great player. I'm not saying he's bad the rest of the way. Probably still a top 5 tight end. But if you can get say you could trade Brock Bowers for Cade Otton and a reliable weekly receiver, I'd absolutely do that. If you could trade him straight up for Kelce or for Kittle or McBride, I'd probably do that. So just keep an eye on that. See what you can get for Bowers, because I don't think he's going to be the tight end 1 the rest of the way. I think a lot of people do still view him as that, as a rookie tight end, playing really well, probably trending up because he's a rookie. I think you can get a lot for him, and I just don't think he's going to perform at as high of a level as we're hoping. So that'll do it for the sell high candidates in week 10. Up next, I'll go over starts and sits. I'll cover every single game in week 10, tell you guys which players I'd be looking to start and sit in my fantasy lineups this week. So stay tuned for that video. It'll be 2 videos. I'll cover every single game, split it up into 2 videos so we get an extra day of practice reports for the second one. Should be a lot of fun for those, so stick around for them. Again, if you have any specific trade questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to give you guys my responses. The more context you give me, the more I can help you out there. And then if you made it this far in the video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me out. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss any of the future content. Appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.